Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build. Landon, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Very, very glad to be here.
Yeah, excited for you to be here. Excited to hear your story, share your story. Before even getting into your story or even questions, I want to give you the opportunity to plug in an awesome achievement that you recently had, which is how we connected, and that's your book.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, when it released, what the name is. I believe you got that plug up on the wall there as well.
Yeah, sure do. Yeah. U.S. Marines at the Battle for Sangin, Operation Enduring Freedom. I joined the Marine Corps in 2007, kind of in the height of what was called the surge back then. Iraq was still pretty hot at that time frame, and then cooled off pretty quickly afterwards. And then Afghanistan was back on the rise. And so just one thing led to another. In my time in service, I fought in that battle, and it was a very consequential, very brutal battle in the war. The predominant Marine Corps force that was fighting the brunt of that war had the highest rate of casualties of any Marine Corps unit, I think, since Vietnam, maybe since World War II. I suspect it's probably Vietnam, but very, very heavy. And the opposing force was so strong that my unit got sent in support of that unit as a mobile quick reaction force up a major, very strategically important arterial mountain road for supply and logistics and just for our ultimate dominance of the region. And so we got into a lot of fights with Taliban and insurgent forces, and it was obviously a very marked experience in my life. I kept a very vivid war journal during that time, and back in 2020, I was working from home and decided I wanted to kind of re-engage with that journal again, and maybe try to create a version that was more palatable for family and friends to read, so my parents could get a better feel for the experience that I went through, that we've talked about over the years, but maybe not in the detail that I wanted to share it in. And I just started writing from that journal, and one thing led to another, and turned into a full-fledged book. So book released November of last year, 2025. There's an audio version and electronic versions. It's all over Amazon and Casemate and publisher websites. And it's for sale, I think, on 5 continents around the world right now. So it's had a huge impact on my family, on the Marines that I served with, on their families, to just be able to gain some insight on what the experience was like. This book is not a Hollywood heroic. I just try to make it a very real personal experience about how it went and how it impacted me. What it was like becoming a war fighter, and then what it was like fighting in war and then coming home afterwards. The good, bad, and ugly. And I held very little back. I really bore my heart. I wanted it to be real. So it's a great book, and I would encourage anybody to check it out.
Congratulations, man. That's it's a really huge accomplishment. No easy task, especially when you're, diving into, tough moments, tough circumstances, tough memories. What was, you might have alluded to this, like in terms of, being able to explain to family or close friends, people around you. Was there like a specific moment that led you to, I got to write this book. I got to just do it.
I think maybe once I made an electronic version of the journal and started kind of coursing through it to fill in the details that I had left out. A lot of people told me at the time, once I started getting public, that I was, writing a book, or at least putting the story together. People were saying, man, that must be such a therapeutic thing to do, like going back through everything. It must be like kind of a healing type experience. It really wasn't. It was just dark. Yeah. It just took me back into a very challenging, place. And I had to, just to make the book real, I had to really re-engage with the emotions and the thought processes. And war is just a tragic happenstance, in its ultimate reality. I mean, there's a lot of good that comes out in war, but man, there's a lot of darkness and a lot of bad. So it was a really difficult experience. What I did get out of it, though, and one of the things that I've started to realize, I think, during the writing, is going back through it all again and again and again helped me get to the point that I could articulate some things that I wanted to communicate to people that I just didn't know how to communicate prior to. Part of the challenge with talking about wartime experiences before I wrote the book is I couldn't quite come off properly. I would
Mhm.
either be a little too open and a little too Marine Corps minded, and I would just sound like an absolute murderous lunatic. And that didn't really translate very well to people. And I
Yeah.
was kind of afraid of that. Like, and they're going to think I'm a psycho if I am too open about these experiences and how they happened and how I felt at the time. And or I would not be able to do that or kind of be afraid to come across that way. And so I would communicate it too light. And it just didn't really capture the full depth and gravity of the experience. And then it kind of made it seem like, oh, maybe it's really not that big a deal.
Yeah.
And I just struggled with both of those. And I think that's one angle of why talking about war is pretty challenging. So I think at some point during the writing, I started to realize like I'm able to really hash these things out in a way that's translatable and understandable to some extent to people that haven't experienced it. And it really clicked for me then. And I thought, man, this is valuable. You know, it's my story, but it's a shared experience with the Marines that I served with. This is has to be valuable to them and their families as well. Like even if just a conversation starter, you know,
Yeah.
something that maybe someone else can peer in and try to get a feel for what the experience was really like, and maybe they can understand their family member a little bit better now that they've come back from war. Their son, their daughter, their husband, their father. So I like that goal, that value that I've gotten out of that is it's just been absolutely tremendous.
Yeah.
Everything beyond it is just gravy at this point.
Yeah. I mean, listen, that tracks uh, in a manner that is, I find at least, so important. Where I think I don't know any veteran that doesn't struggle with exactly what you brought up in terms of going too far into it or not going far enough, and you're
Yeah,
kind of stuck on either extreme. Uh, I find that to be extremely, extremely isolating, and that
big
tends to
time.
be potentially like an initiator of long-term issues where in that kind of transition phase you end up feeling like, okay, well, what's the point in saying anything because of what exactly what you just described, and then you end up just getting stuck, holding your experiences in because there's no point. At least it feels that way, it seems that way. So
Yeah,
that's really cool that you brought that up, and I mean, I completely agree that I mean, writing is certainly helpful in terms of like at least trying to find some answers to that like internal dilemma. Um,
no doubt,
yeah,
no
and I
doubt.
think that said, again, that's also a big part of the purpose of the show here is to allow for veterans like yourself to share your story and trying to shed some light to experiences so that others can hear it, and then I hope bridge that gap a little bit more, better, simpler, whatever the right word is there.
Yeah, I love that goal. I love that end. I think two things. Number one, war is so consequential. It's always been a part of humanity. It will always be a
Mhm.
part of humanity. I mean, in spite of our best efforts to establish good, equitable systems that work out for everyone, it's just in the evil is in the heart of man, and there will just always be war, and
Mhm.
people will always be impacted by it. And so, I think there are so many war stories that are worth telling, just provided they give people another angle, you know, another paint stroke to the broader picture,
Yeah.
another piece of understanding of the impacts on those who participate in it and the dramatic implications. It's just such a tragic and consequential event,
Mhm.
and it's ongoing
Yeah.
and throughout every generation. So one of the things I want to bring up, I'd be remiss to not bring up, is I have a part of my wartime experience, our generation of military veterans, you know, they say that burn pits are kind of the Agent Orange of our generation of war fighters. In both Iraq and Afghanistan, burn pits were very prevalent on almost all military installations, even the small ones, like some of the ones
Mhm.
that I was on way out far in the rural areas. And we slept next to it. We threw it, anything that would burn would go in
Mhm.
that burn pit. So we breathed in toxic smoke pretty constantly. Anytime you're on base, the only way to get away from it was out on patrol. A lot of guys have succumbed to some really nasty diseases, cancers, and other rarities that have taken their lives. Just last year, I buried two friends that have died of
Mhm.
cancer. One of them was only 39 years old. And so, another big part of this book that I wanted to kind of continue the meaningfulness of military service and try to attach it to something that continues to be meaningful for the veteran community, is a portion of all book sales goes to a nonprofit 501c3 called Hunter 7 Foundation that is kind of designed to tackle that exact issue, which is detecting cancer early in the veteran community, especially for GWAT veterans, and then helping veterans that are currently fighting cancer and or military service members and their families. They're doing a profound work, and they're blowing up everywhere. Hunter7.org, I think, or Hunter 7 Foundation. Very easy to find on social media and on their website. But if you buy the book, a portion of those proceeds go directly to Hunter 7, which was very important and meaningful to me. So just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, that sounds like a very important cause. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to have your contact info, your book link, and I'll have that Hunter 7 also information in the show notes. So anyone listening can just easily find it there. Also, obviously, Google exists, so easy to find all of this either way.
Sure.
Cool. So we'll hear more about your book and your story, obviously, as we go through your story. However, going back to regular programming, kicking off here, first and foremost, where are you calling in from? Where's home base for you?
Texas, DFW.
Awesome.
Born and raised.
Tons going on there in terms of real estate, correct?
Yeah, it's a booming market. I mean, for the last decade or so, for a number of reasons, Texas has been the target of mass migration. The demographics are really strong here, and there's a lot of job opportunity. The economy is just so strong, so many opportunities. The regulatory environment is very friendly to big business, and it's just attracted a lot. So naturally, the real estate industry is booming.
Do you, out of curiosity, do you feel and or see data centers going up all over, or not really if you're not looking for it?
I think they're being well strategically placed. Not everyone would say that. If I lived out in a rural area and I had land and a data center was going in next door, I would feel very much not that way. But there's a lot of talk about data centers. There's just so much need currently. And there's not a ton of public infrastructure available and ready for data center. They're very high water and electrical users. And so, everybody in the real estate industry I guarantee everyone is having data center conversations, whether they're directly involved or not. I am not directly involved in data centers, but I work in the industrial space, and we are looking at what land holdings we may have, or what buildings or adjacent placements that we have that could be candidates for data, just because there's so much market demand. So in Texas, in particular, there are a lot of facilities going up. I'm not passing by any on my commute to work, but I know the pockets where they exist. I know some of the developers that are putting them on the ground are starting to, and it's booming. I mean, I haven't been out to it yet, but in Abilene, Texas, which I think is 2.5, 3 hours from here west, I'm fairly certain it's the biggest data center development in the world right now, which is just wild. And there are others that are of the same scale. Take data centers out of it, though, there are massive developments in corporate investment in the state of Texas in general from semiconductors and chip facilities down in the Austin area, up in North Texas, multi-billion-dollar projects that are going to take a decade or two to fully develop and build out once it's phased out. And it's boomtown right now. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, a lot happening in that space. And I knew of that project nearby to you in Abilene because we had a guest on the show who's working on that project.
Oh, nice.
So I was curious if on like your day to day, you're seeing it. Obviously, it's a super important topic for many reasons.
That's right.
Anyhow, so I know you're a father of 3, which is amazing. You have another baby coming on the way. Congratulations. Extremely amazing. If any of your kids ask you or tell you that they want to join service, what do you do? How do you react?
I think serving in America's military is an honorable thing. I was brought up that way, very patriotic, and I think what we represent as a country fundamentally is individual liberty and justice. Whether or not it's always played out can be argued from a lot of different angles, but that is what we stand for at the core. That's what America is all about. And serving in the military supports that. I think if my kids wanted to join at what time they're old enough to, it would really depend on timing and circumstance and what their motivation was behind it. I would absolutely not discourage it. I think I would try to steer my kids in the right direction with their choices and their MOS decisions and how they could make an impact and how the military can impact them, and try to make sure that things were in a good fit. I think that there are also times maybe that I would not want them to join the military. We are a great nation and we do stand for great things. It doesn't mean we are always involved in things that I necessarily agree with, or maybe that others would. If we were caught up in a war, in a challenging war with questionable merits on the front end, I may not encourage them to join during that specific time frame. I think it just depends. But on the whole, service is, again, it's very honorable. Fundamentally, you are putting your life on the line for the benefit of other people. And that's a very honorable thing. So it would thrill me to death if it was the right thing for some or all of my kids. But there's a lot of ways that you can have positive impact in the world, not necessarily through the military. And I think if my kids are moving in that direction to have a positive, godly impact on this world, then I'm okay with whatever they decide.
Yep. Very well said. So, you're given you're in a managerial position. This question is specifically, good to hear kind of your feedback and your take on it, which is, how do you see us better recruiting, hiring, and retaining veterans in industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's certainly been a part of the conversation of my corporate experience all the way through. I think that the military, we'll talk about it in more detail, I think, later in the show, but there is a lot that military personnel has to offer into the corporate world, into the business world in general. There's also a lot of gaps that need to be bridged. I think I always try to connect with veterans in the business world when there's opportunity to, especially if they're on the job hunt. And I always try to coach them up a little bit based on my experience and lessons learned and mistakes made, and those that I understand from some of the other veterans. If I were to put myself back where I was a decade ago when I was trying to figure out my way into the corporate world, some of the advice that I would give myself on the high level is just to find common ground with people and show interest. I mean, there's definitely a difference between military life and civilian life, but it's all just still filled with people. And I think transitional periods in life are always challenging. And the advice, regardless of the context, high level, is kind of the same. It's be a good friend to people, take interest in people, go out of your way to figure out what's important to them, and meet needs where they are, and be a good friend. And if you do some of those things, that automatically bridges some of the cultural gaps, just because you become more adaptable. And then, we can get into hard skills versus soft skills and some of those things. But I think you have to be adaptable and be humble, and, use people skills to find common ground with people. So
great answer. Yeah. And kind of like a segue off of that, naturally, as veterans come into civilian workforce and civilians potentially meet veterans for literally the first time, how do you see us better bridging, vice versa? This goes both ways. How do you see us better bridging kind of like social and cultural gaps?
Yeah. So some of the ways that I think awareness is a good first step, I guess. A lot of the better conversations that I've had in bigger business contexts is leadership within the business trying to effectively communicate to its workforce, or the people within the company, about the veteran community and about military service, and just kind of reminding people hey, let's not forget these guys and gals that are coming out of the military service chose to go be a part of a warfighting force on our behalf, on their behalf as well, and their family, but on behalf of what we're doing. The abilities that we have to conduct business in the safe and peaceful and free and just environment that we have is in large part because of the efforts and sacrifices of this warfighting force. Let's remember that and give them some credit for the decisions that they made to go and do and be a part of those things. I think if you can frame your thought process about a veteran or a group of veterans from that standpoint, it's a lot easier to look past some of the rigidity and the the sharper edges that military personnel come with as they are transitioning out of the military and back into civilian life. It takes time
Yeah.
to make those adjustments and adapt into a new environment, just like it took a shorter period of time, to go into the military. I think just understanding, mutual understanding, and across the board, having a little bit of compassion, it goes a long way.
Yeah. Yeah. The shorter period of time going in is certainly because of extreme environment that doesn't, otherwise exist on the
Big time,
reverse circumstance. So yeah. Yeah. Well said.
big time.
Awesome. All right, Landon. So we're going to kick off with your formal introduction.
Sure.
From there, we'll roll into your life story. Landon
Great.
Longgrear served 8 years in the Marine Corps, 1st Battalion, 23rd Marines Infantry, achieving the rank of sergeant. He deployed to Helmand Province in 2011, fighting in the battle for Sangin as part of a regional quick reaction force. Landon graduated Bootcamp as platoon honorman, first class PFT, expert rifle every time. Over his career, he held billets from saw gunner and grenadier up through fire team leader, squad leader, platoon guide, and platoon sergeant, earning numerous medals and commendations along the way. Today, Landon is vice president of development, leading commercial real estate investment across central and western U.S. markets. He's also a published author. His personal war memoir, U.S. Marines at the Battle for Sangen, documents his experience firsthand during Operation Enduring Freedom. Outside of work, Landon is an avid learner, outdoorsman, husband, and father of 3. He's a man committed to faith, family, and service, and he brings that same grounded, principled approach to everything he does. Landon, let's kick off with childhood, where you grew up, what childhood was like, and walk us through to service from there.
Yeah, you bet. Born and raised in Arlington, Texas, and I had a great childhood. I had a great, stable family, middle-class family. Both my parents were educators. They're still together today. Great community around me, a lot of family here in the area. And, I grew up in a great, like-minded community. Cell phones didn't exist back then. I was a 90s kid growing up, and we just had freedom. I mean, I had the type of childhood that I would love to provide for my kids today, but just can't because of the way that the world now is. But I would take off on my bike for the day, and my parents would have no idea where I was or, when I would be back outside of the, whatever the drop dead time was that I had to be back. And, the parents all around the neighborhood operated that way. Went to public school, so all my friends were kind of like in the same general area. We knew where everybody lived, and we just bounced from house to house and go to the parks and make dirt jumps in the woods and renegade the neighborhoods at night, just creating all sorts of like relatively innocent childhood chaos that we could. And it was great. Movies were great back then. Punk rock was in, X Games was going on. I just had a great childhood. I could look back and nitpick things that I wish would have been different, but on the whole, I think I'm very privileged and blessed to have grown up the way that I did. I also grew up in a very thriving church community. The sense of, like I said earlier, patriotism and service, in receiving the benefits of the people that have come before me and extending those forward was just always a part of my childhood. In a very healthy and positive way. And I played a ton of sports, every sport, loved to be active, loved the outdoors, spent a ton of time in the woods, had some family property in some different places and some friends whose parents had deer leases and lake houses. And if I could be outside doing anything, hunting, fishing, hiking in the woods, camping, skiing, riding mountain bikes, dirt bikes, just very, very active. And so I look back with a lot of gratitude for my upbringing.
Yeah, well said. I'm similar age as you, and had that similar kind of upbringing, childhood in the 90s, no cell phone. That was a good time.
Yeah, it sure was. And you probably started. Well, I know your child is a little bit younger, but I've started to re-engage with some of those old '90s movies with my nice. Kids. And it's been so fun. I was just telling somebody yesterday we started watching the Mighty Ducks over spring break, which was awesome. And Sandlot, Angels in the Outfield, and man, what a time! It was just great decade to grow up in.
Definitely. So how did military start getting on your radar? I mean, did you have, community, people in the community? Was it family? How'd that happen?
I I don't remember a time that I ever didn't want to be in the military or feel like it was something that I was supposed to do. I think I always planned on like being a military guy for the rest of my life. It didn't work out that way, but that was my dream since forever. Growing up deer hunting in the Texas Hill Country, I always envisioned myself as a sniper in Vietnam. And I'd spent a lot of time up in the Ozarks in the Boston Mountains in Arkansas as a kid, camping in very rigid, cold, rough environments in the winter. And it was the same thing. I mean, that some years my dad and I would get there and the roads would be too iced and snowed over to drive in. So we would hike everything in and we would stay under a cave overhang with a nonstop fire going. And that was what kept us warm in single digit, like weather. And I just growing up in the rough outdoor environment was directly translatable to the military. And that certainly resonated with me. I think the other aspect of it was more purposeful. And that was that, and there is injustice in the world. There always has been, there always will be. But the American military in particular goes and stands on the front line against it. We're the good guys. We go and stand up for what's right in the world. We give people freedom and liberty. We give people opportunities that they are not warranted elsewhere. Tyranny is a terrible thing, and we stand against that. And being a part of the Marine Corps, military as a whole, was my opportunity to go and be one of those guys that stood in the gap. That was strong enough, brave enough. They had the courage to say, no, there is a difference between right and wrong. And this is the line that you won't pass. It just always resonated with me. Always felt like it was something that I was called to do, supposed to do.
So when you're initially going to recruiters, did you kind of like similar to how you answered military holistically, did you have that same approach to the Marines in particular, or you went to recruiters and that kind of guided you accordingly?
Yeah, the Marine Corps and the Army were really the two branches that spoke to me the most. There could have been a lot of great opportunities in the Air Force and the Navy. They just didn't resonate with me. I think in part because I just grew up in the woods on the ground. The thought of being in the Air Force was fun. I did have a granddad that was in the Army Air Corps prior to becoming the Air Force in World War II. He flew around in planes, and I was pretty infatuated with that when I was young. My other granddad was in the Army. He died when I was 1.5, so I never got a great profile on him and his military experience, but he was going to be a part of, come to find out later in life, a part of the invasion wave to invade mainland Japan. Wow. Had we not dropped the bombs. And the casualty projections, if we would have done that invasion, were astronomical. So I'm not sure if he was infantry or just a part of a support force, but he obviously made it out of that experience. Just being on the ground, that's what really spoke to me. I went and talked to the Marine Corps recruiter first. Well, I should say I gained exposure to the Marines long before I ever went and talked to the recruiter. I remember, you might remember a movie called The Rock back in, it was probably a 90s movie, had to have been, with Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery. And it was a group of Desert Storm Marines that were, fighting injustice in an arguably wrong way. But they were like these hardcore dudes. I mean, they were as tough as nails. I mean, there was just nobody more hardcore, more violent, more professional, more effective at warfighting than Marines. That was the emphasis. That was my understanding of the Marine Corps through my upbringing. And when I saw Marines, when I did talk to recruiters, when I saw them around town, I just saw the pinnacle of excellence. I saw an immeasurable amount of resolve and confidence and immovability. I mean, those guys are just machines and very tight, very top notch. And I just saw what I wanted. I wanted what they had. I saw that they had things that exposed like gaps in my own life. Extreme discipline that I didn't have, but I wanted. Things that I knew I needed in my life. And that's what ultimately drew me there. I did talk to the Army for a little bit. I knew that the opportunities could be great. I was looking at trying to go for a Ranger contract at one point in time. I knew all the schools that you could go to, jump school and sniper school and airborne school. Just all of that was great. But becoming a Marine and being a part of the Brotherhood and having that identity it's what ultimately got me. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, when you initially sign up, did you, because you kind of mentioned it before, being on the ground and childhood and whatnot, did you
Mhm.
know that you were going to be super adamant about infantry? Because that, of course, they could sway you in multiple ways.
No, I didn't. I knew I wanted to be a part of combat forces, but the way that I signed up for the Marine Corps, I would do different for a number of reasons. Whenever I signed up, it was under a program called the Platoon Leadership Course, and I can't remember if I actually contracted this way or it was just kind of the plan that we were going to move
Hmm.
forward with. One of the things that my granddad always told me growing up was, if you're going to go into the military, go in as an officer. Don't do otherwise. You'll have a better life. Especially if you're going to do it as a career, higher, longer advancement, more opportunities afterwards, and on and on. At the end of high school, though, I just was in a bad spot. I needed a major change. College at that point in time, I don't think would have been very successful. I had some bad habits that I was trying to break out of. I just needed discipline. I needed to get out of my environment and into something different. And so I was very, very determined to get into the Marine Corps as fast as possible. My
Hmm.
family was very concerned, though. I mean, we're right in the middle of two wars. They did not want me to go enlisted. They definitely didn't want me to join the Marine Corps in the middle of Iraq and Afghanistan. And so the concession, the middle ground between all that was, okay, well, I'm going to go in through a reserve program called the Platoon Leadership Course, which basically you go in, you go through boot camp and MOS training, drop into a reserve unit, start college, and then do OCS kind of in tandem with college so that when you graduate college, you immediately commission as an officer. I don't think it's a faster route. It's just an option and one of the ones that I chose. As a part of that, the jobs available to reservists are somewhat dependent on the nearest reserve unit. And there was an artillery battery here in DFW over at NASJRB that was the automatic candidate. And because I went PLC, I didn't care what MOS I had. In my mind, it was like, I'm going to go ahead and get in so I can get the title, get the initial training, but I'm going to hit the fleet as an officer once I get through college. And that was a huge mistake. Um, Only because the MOS I landed just did not resonate with me at all. And so I suffered through MOS, a long MOS school, learning this anti-artillery radar system as a technician. I had zero interest in it whatsoever, was not excited about it. Felt like I had taken major steps back after making it through initial training, being super gung-ho as a Marine. And it just ended up with a lot of lost time that could have been otherwise spent. But as things would have it, I made some unit transfers and kind of fixed that, which we could talk about. But anyway, that
Yeah.
was the initial sign
I'm
up.
Yeah, I mean, of course, obviously it's all hindsight knowledge. So,
Of course,
for whatever it's worth, to give yourself a little bit of a break. Plus you were,
for sure.
18 or whatnot.
Yeah,
All right. So like that MOS, I'm guessing though was after basic, or was it different
yeah.
because that
Went to
program? Okay.
basic, and boot camp it was terrifying at first, but it became awesome. I mean, shock and awe is the phrase that
Hmm.
I always tell myself when I think about boot camp. Marine Corps boot camp is real deal. I mean, it's shocking just how
Hmm.
aggressive and violent it is from the very start. The intimidation factor and the chaos that they implement into the training regimen is so noteworthy. I mean,
Hmm.
it just shocks you, but it's supposed to. I think a major part of boot camp on the front end, especially, is to break everyone down.
Hmm.
All of us guys joining in that time frame, like there was a lot of ego. We're joining the military in a time of war, two wars that America's in, after years of watching it on the evening news preceding 2007. And we didn't join any branch. We joined the Marine Corps. Like, we're some top-notch dudes. And at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot, they've got to rip all that out. I think that, that ego and the pride of prior life accomplishments, it just inhibits the process of developing and becoming a Marine effectively. So it was shocking at first, but I learned very quickly that all I had to do was what they told me to do. And then it became really easy. And as I looked around my squad of or platoon and battalion, I guess at that time, of other Marine recruits, like there were some guys in there that were stout. I mean, some fullback built type guys that just looked the part. They were freaking huge, super strong, really fast. And I would size guys up like I would on a football team or a soccer team or, in an MMA dojo. And you get a good feel for who's capable of doing what. But it didn't take too long to realize that a lot of those appearances may not have held any weight. It was really mental strength and determination that rose people to the top. And once I figured that out, I started thriving because I loved it and I had something to prove and I really wanted to be the best. Up to that point in my life, throughout all my sports, I was really good at most sports. I was never the top guy, though, ever. I didn't have the size. I wasn't committed enough to it. I had different interests. I, wasn't quite really fast, but not quite fast enough, not quite strong enough. But in boot camp, I had the same opportunity as everyone else to be the best, and I did it. And I got up to squad leader pretty quick, and then a couple of weeks later, got up to being the platoon guide of a 90-man platoon and held it almost consistently throughout boot camp and graduated platoon honorman. And it felt so good. And I loved it. I loved being a part of the Marine Corps. I loved being a Marine at that point in time. Man, it was awesome. So very tough experience, but it was a huge milestone that I really needed to achieve in my life. And it broke through a lot of those barriers prior to that I had been trying to find ways to overcome. I mean, it gave me discipline. It gave me purpose. It gave me a new way of looking at life. It exposed me to the viewpoints of all these different guys that had come from all over the nation. Great experience.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, what I find to be kind of the longest lasting lesson learned from military experience is mind over matter, per se, right? Anyone could get broken down so ridiculously quickly. And only until you understand and realize that do you understand and realize the power of your mind and determination over everything else.
Big time. Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah. Awesome. So you well, actually, before we even carry on there, so I think that there's some internal rivalry over where you did boot camp. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, Parris Island is definitely the more historical Marine Corps boot camp place. It's East Coast is where the Marine Corps started. And there's something like reputable about being a Parris Island guy. Back then, I'm sure it's the same today, but whether you go East Coast or West Coast to boot camp, in the Marine Corps, there's only two places that boot camp occurs. It's Parris Island or Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego. San Diego and Camp Pendleton kind of in tandem. And it's on which side of the Mississippi you're on. There might be some variance there, but if you're on the west side, you're going West Coast. I think the arguments that I've heard, the East Coast, they have sand fleas. It's super humid. And that's kind of the pain point there. In the West Coast is the ocean mountains of Camp Pendleton. And hiking up those with the same amount of weight for the same durations is astronomically challenging. I mean, the beat down on your body to be up in those hills for patrolling and hiking and everything is really tough. But it's also in this incredibly beautiful environment with great weather most of the time year round. So, I think experiences vary. If you join the Marine Corps, you're a Marine regardless. There's some rivalry for sure, but I think it's all just friendly banter. Yeah,
it's good. Yeah, in good faith rivalry type thing. From what I've pulled up. Yeah. Awesome. So, all right. So you finish boot camp. Sounds like you're in good morale, given, how you excelled through that process. I guess this is now where you get that MOS that you're not super happy with.
Yeah, this is where things kind of start turning down. I went to Marine Combat Training, which is at the School of Infantry. If you go infantry, you're there in the infantry training battalion for a month or a month and a half longer than the guys that go to MCT. So it's just kind of like basic level infantry skills. And then you go to your MOS school. My first one was in 29 Palms, California, basic electronics school. And then I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for the duration of a very long MOS school, which ended up being, I think, 10 months in total. That was another part of the problem was like, if it doesn't matter what job I get, some MOS schools are 2 months long and that's it, or a month long. But regardless, again, it was a bitter experience because it just had zero interest. So I had to force myself painfully to engage and not fail out of it. It's what I signed up to do. I committed to it. I'm a Marine. I'm supposed to be here and do the right thing and take orders and, execute well. And so I did it, but it was challenging. And then I dropped in. What's that?
Why was that so long?
Well, because it's very specific. The radar system, man, I haven't talked about this in so long. These details are very hazy, but the radar system that we were working on was the size of a utility trailer, taller. It had this huge radar panel, and it was supposed to detect enemy incoming mortars from way far out, enemy artillery. And so if there's like a 2 or 3 truck setup with this radar system. So if we were out in the field, we would drive up to some high ground, set up the radar unit, and then set up the big box computer truck that runs it a ways away. And then there were some antenna systems and maybe a generator or two, and we had to connect all of them together. And then as the system is up and running, if anything were to break at all, there was technicians that had to go figure out how to fix it. And it is very specific electrical training. I mean, the manuals that we had were huge, thick of schematic designs of this system to try to troubleshoot and identify what went wrong and how to fix it. And so we had to learn multimeters and oscillators and a whole bunch of other equipment that I forgot the names to try to diagnose this multi-million-dollar piece of machinery that is tracking enemy income fire. All of that, if you're into a more engineering, minded, and if you're electrically minded, if you're interested in the piece of equipment, like it's really good training. I just didn't have any interest in any of that. I'm like, I'm a Marine, I'm a fighter. Like, I want to know everything that there is to know about every single weapons system that there is in the Marine Corps and how they're deployed and when they're deployed. And then I want to go deploy them. But now I'm stuck with this giant trailer electronic piece of equipment that I have to know everything about. It just killed me.
I hear you. It's just the wrong fit. I mean, it is what it is.
It was the wrong fit. And like, there's no shame on it, like jobs in the military. It is honorable to volunteer. America is a 100% voluntary military force. I mean, it is a great thing to serve. And there are a lot of good jobs that resonate with people. And people still, if you're an artillery electronic guy or some other non-combat job, like you're still sacrificing to go into war zones, to leave your family, to put yourself at risk, to do jobs that are difficult to do, to take orders, to subject yourself to the will of others, the will of the nation and the government. And it's an honorable thing. It's just a really bad fit for me.
Yeah. Did you ask it or try to switch out, or was that just not a thing?
I did. It wasn't. I tried in boot camp as platoon honorman. They were like, "Hey, you can switch, but you're going to have to go active duty, and we can get you in the infantry." And I just didn't have the. I'd made this deal with my whole family after years of negotiating. Like, I'll go in under PLC. And so shifting over to active duty, broad mix of emotions. I just felt like I would be betraying what I had committed to. And then once I started the MOS training, the way I was told it works at that time is the reserve unit, that training gets paid for by the reserve unit's annual budget, not the broader Marine Corps. So it's really hard to get out of because the unit itself pays for you to go through boot camp and MOS school. Whereas if you're active duty, broader Marine Corps budget, and so it's less siloed. So for that reason, it was just impossible to get out of while I was in it. Now I found a way out of it, and that was once I hit the unit and had been there for a period of time. There was a first sergeant who was a prior infantry guy, very high speed, had done a lot of roles in the infantry, been to Iraq several times, I think, maybe Afghanistan, been around. And I went to go talk to him. He was the only guy I felt like I could really share all this with. And I told him, like, I need something more high speed than this. This is not what I signed up to join the Marine Corps to do. This is not what I will look back on and be proud of. Like, I need to go be a part of a fighting force And we talked about inter-service transfer, going into the Army, going into the Navy. Talked about joining a few different units. At that point in time, the unit that I was with had 2 deployments to Iraq that I missed out on and 1 to Afghanistan. And the way that they were doing it is they were taking small groups of reservist guys and attaching them to active duty units that just needed a few more numbers. And so there was a lot of guys trying to deploy at that time. All of our senior enlisted guys, like all my drill instructors in boot camp, all my combat instructors in MCT, all the guys in the MOS school, everybody had deployed to Iraq. Everybody. I mean, it was a rite of passage thing. And so getting overseas was critically important as a part of like being a Marine and having a successful career. And so there was a lot of guys that wanted to go. I missed out on all those deployments and I was really concerned with getting overseas. I just knew that later on in life, I would look back and just not want to have to reconcile the thought that I joined the military during my generation's war and didn't even go over and be a part of it. I just couldn't be one of those guys. So I was talking to this first sergeant and he said, man, there's this infantry unit down in Houston. The whole battalion's going. They're on a deployment cycle. Every 3 or 4 years, the whole battalion goes overseas. They just got back from Iraq a year or 2 ago, and they were on cycle to go to Afghanistan in 2010. And this was 2009 when I was talking to this guy. He said, let me call down there. You call down there, and let's see if we can get you a unit transfer. And so that became the plan, and it worked. He called down, he made an introduction. I drove down and met with the company first sergeant down there and some of the support staff. And they said, listen, the only way we can make this transfer is if you move to Houston, because we will be a closer unit to your unit up there, and we can get you in. And so I put plans in place and I made it happen.
What was your, before moving there to Houston, then what was your cycle like? I mean, were you, because it sounded like you were a reserve unit, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I started
Sorry,
go ahead.
No, that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, I started college and did typical reservist training, which is 1 weekend out of the month, 2 weeks out of the summer. And you know, like was personal training at the time, staying in very top fitness, going to the gun range all the time, continuing education. And I'm sure it's the same in the Marine Corps or in the reserve and active duty with Marine Corps Institute, MCIs. So there's like supplemental training that you go through, like educational training. You get sent books, and that's how you promote and advance land navigation, warfighting tactics, and weapon systems, and like broad-based typical Marine Corps knowledge. And so all of that's going on the side, in addition to the training and, you know, keeping up standards. So it's more all encompassing than just that 1 weekend out of the 1 weekend out of the month and 2 weeks out of the summer. Yeah. But as it relates to being at the unit with your command staff, that's all it is. And then, you know, I had some friends in the unit that we'd hang out outside of it and whatnot. And again, I'm progressing through school, but not very well at that time. It was just a very down season.
Sure. Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So you finally get the switch. You move to Houston. What happens next?
Yeah. So I got to Houston, first drill, which is that 1 weekend out of the month. We did PFTs, physical fitness tests, and combat fitness tests. And I smoked most of that unit, which felt really good. I was in great shape at the time. Always a first class PFTer. And there were studs in that unit too. Don't get me wrong, but I just had something to prove. I'm like, you know, I'm back in boot camp mode again. I'm here with all these now grunts, and I did not choose to go the grunt route. Like, I've got to prove myself and improve my worth. And it didn't take long to do that. I just tried to stay very humble. I took what came my way. Whatever they wanted me to do, I did. And it didn't take long to mesh in. Some of the guys that I went to boot camp with were in that unit, as a matter of fact, which was kind of a fun coincidence. And that gave me some kind of immediate in, because they knew how I performed in boot camp, which was good. But I think first drill, they assigned me a saw gunner. I mean, they gave me the M249 squad automatic belt-fed weapon and said, this is yours now. You're going to be our guy. Go kill it. And I just felt so good. Like, man, I'm back. I'm back in Marine Corps mode. The next drill, we went to a live fire assault like range at Fort Hood in Central Texas. and assaulted through enemy positions in this several 100-meter, live fire range, and just laying waste with this belt-fed machine gun, leaping and, combat bounding toward an objective and being aggressive again. Felt so good. I mean, it just brought me back.
So yeah, this time they got it right, which is great.
Yeah, definitely.
What happens next? Like, what's I guess the work up till like the next phase of what happens in your career?
Yeah, whenever I checked into that unit, we all knew we were on docket for Afghanistan. That unit was getting plussed up. There were a ton of prior active and prior Iraq guys in the unit already. And it swelled because a lot of the active duty guys that had gotten out but were in Texas wanted to go to Afghanistan. And so a lot of guys were joining the unit at the time, like more mid-career or like early career senior enlisted guys, corporal sergeants and staff sergeants. And so we were plussed up with a ton of wartime experience, which is really great. And every drill and summer AT was in preparation for this Afghanistan deployment. I think we activated in October 2010 officially, and we started our 5-month workup for the deployment. So we activated, flew out to Camp Margarita on Camp Pendleton in California, and we're on active orders. So we're there full time, active duty, doing that 5-month workup training, which is a regimented, like scheduled training. Certain milestones that have to get hit. And so we did live fires and rifle quals, got spun up on all that stuff again, which we had been progressively doing, but just did with a lot more intentionality. We did IED lane training. IED was a major killer in Afghanistan. And so we learned everything there is to know about improvised explosive devices, ton of combat patrolling, and every radio sequencing or radio training, call for fire, and 9-line casualty evacuations and medical evacuations and landing zone briefs and on and on and on. And entry choke point training and combat lifesaver, like medical training for if guys get shot or they get shrapnel or they get an extremity blown off or they get stabbed and all the, like we just went through everything again over that 5-month period. And then there were certain graded activities that we would do holistically as a unit. The whole battalion deployed, or it was a part of this deployment, which was 4 companies comprised of, I want to say 250 Marines each, give or take. And so there was a lot of us. Alpha Company and headquarters for 123 were in Houston. And then we had a weapons company attachment from Austin. And then Bravo Company was somewhere in Louisiana. And then Charlie Company was in Texas down near the border. So we all went to California together and started prepping up for the war. That was a great experience. It was good to bring us all back in and get us ready for what was coming. In addition to the more standard Marine Corps training, a pre-deployment workup, I think under most circumstances, and was our experience, is uniquely oriented around the specific place in Afghanistan that we're deploying to. And so we're getting real-time updates from the unit that we are going to replace as they're occurring, as those guys are overseas fighting the war and we're back home training for it. An important thing happened at the same time that our workup started in October 2010. And that was that the Helmand Province had previously, I think, transitioned like total command control from the British forces over to the Marine Corps sometime in 2009. And there were major initiatives, major pushes, combat pushes in Helmand Province leading up to our deployment. So the battle for Marja was a big part of that, where the Marine Corps went into Marja and pushed through to establish dominance and eradicate enemy forces, create stability. There were other big pushes around that time frame, but Sangen, that initiative started in October 2010. 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, an active duty infantry unit, took over the region from the Brits and had a very aggressive posture of disrupting enemy activity in the area, establishing a strong foothold and creating stability for the broader counterinsurgency mission. And because Sangen, being as strategically important as it was, it had a huge enemy footprint, long-time enemy stronghold. The Brits for the preceding years were active in combat in Sangen, but had a less aggressive posture. I think we were told that they focused more on the urban epicenter and kind of stayed out of the more rural river valley area. But the Marine Corps' mentality was completely different. It was eradicate all enemy forces, completely dominate the space, and take over. And it flipped into the most kinetic combat operating zone immediately. 3-5 in their first 3 days had 10 KIAs and 35 wounded in action, which was big. And that swelled in the first month to 15 KIAs, 40 amputees, 40 plus amputees, and I think over 70 wounded in action.
Wow.
And it was just big casualties for that time in the war. And we were en route to head to a different location, but because of the opposition that 3-5 was facing, the unit we were going to replace got sent in to support 3-5. And so that became our trajectory. And very early on in the workup, we started learning about Sangin and knowing that we were headed in to that battle space. And it was crazy. All the reports that we were getting, it really set a very aggressive tone during the workup early, because we knew that we were heading into something real.
Yeah, I was about to ask how much did you know of what was literally going on there? And it sounds like you were getting those reports, which also sounds like, of course, made training the workup more serious, real, and that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, very much so. We were getting reports every week, I want to say, on pitch. Sometimes it was daily.
That's great.
3-5 unit got almost wiped out, if not for air support. 13 small arms attacks on 135 platoon on any particular day. 325 hit an IED on the 611 and an accompanying ambush, and on and on and on. And we were learning about enemy tactics and our tactics and what was working and wasn't working. And then we were adapting our training accordingly. So it was pretty high speed.
Yeah. So getting to kind of like the moment of deployment for this, what mark are you in your service at that point? Like how many years in?
I went in 2007. We deployed in very early 11, so 4 years.
Okay, yeah.
And I picked up corporal during the pre-deployment workup, which is non-commissioned officer, the first rank as a non-commissioned officer, and it came with privileges and responsibilities, and it was great. I mean, it is a very sought after and respected rank in the lower enlisted ranks, and it felt great. So
that's awesome. So walk us through to kind of like the moment of deployment. What was your mind, what was your mind like? And I also, I guess, given, again, going back to how you explained your kind of like verbal agreement with your family, like how did that go?
Yeah, my mindset was very rigid. The pre-deployment workup that we did, we had a really good idea of what we're headed into, and we had spent 5 months getting ready for it. My whole Marine Corps career, everything evolved around Iraq and Afghanistan. And so, as a grunt, especially in the infantry, engaging in combat is a massive rite of passage. Yeah. Your whole world evolves around how effective you are at combat experiences, and being in a time of war when guys around you have experienced theirs, it's a really big deal. And so I think also building up training and mental resolve and physical, endurance and just everything that it takes to position yourself to be effective at war, you have to be very aggressive. You have to be willing to do real violence, on other human beings. And it takes a lot of training to get to the point that you can do that. So, when we were about to deploy, I was ready. I was fully committed. I am a war fighter. I'm headed into a war to fight in it, and nothing else matters. And thankfully for me, I didn't have a wife and kids at home. Like I didn't have a ton of commitment or long-sighted plans for my life. It was, here I am, and I'm going into this, and this is all that matters, and I'll figure out everything after. And so mentally, I was very ready, and I spiritually, I was ready enough. And that's another big topic that we could talk too long about. I think for my family's sake, it was a very challenging time. I look back now as a parent, and just have such a higher appreciation and like humbled understanding for the pain that I put my parents through.
Yeah.
You know, having said that though, they were committed as well to the thought that freedom isn't free, and life as we know it ceases to exist if people don't stand up for it and sometimes fight and war against those that want to destroy it. And they knew that I was right where I wanted to be, right where I felt called to be, that I was completely resolved in the decisions that I had made that led up to that deployment, and that should the worst occur and, you know, I not make it back, that I died doing something I was fully committed to, that I love doing for the right reasons. And that was enough for them, to at least suffer through it well. So a lot of really hard conversations and difficult, deep moments. You know, I detail some in the book of saying those goodbyes, and they were hard for me. They were 10 times as hard for my parents, I'm sure. And I just, man, I honor military parents. Just think they don't get enough credit for sending their children off. And sometimes they don't, you know, their next reunion with their child is in a flag draped casket. It's just so tragic. And we lost some guys overseas, and I'm, you know, connected with some of the family members here. And just, I don't think it gets any easier for them. I've seen it not get a whole lot easier. So there's a real cost, and it's a big challenge, but it's just a part of life, I guess.
Yeah, well said. Certainly is. So walk us through, you deploy, what happens next?
We touched down in Afghanistan in less than 24 hours. Right by where we were hooched up for a temporary period of time was a medical facility, and there were 3 Army personnel. They got flown in critical condition. Our corpsman went into the med facility to try to help out, and came back out 30 minutes later. This is 6 a.m. in the morning or 7 a.m. We're formed up. It's cold and rainy outside. These guys are flown in, put right into the facility right in front of us. Our corpsmen go in to help out. 30 minutes later, corpsmen come back out, say 2 of them just bled out on the operating table, and the third's probably not going to make it. We're just smacked in the face immediately with this is like, whoa. I mean, we knew this was coming, but oh my gosh, this is very real. And it just escalated from there. We got sent into Sangen and landed, and the first day at Fob Nole in Sangen, there was just a measurable amount of explosions and gunfire right outside the wire in earshot. In the valley, the Sangin River Valley is 30 miles long and 2 miles wide, probably on average. I mean, it's a huge valley, and it is a labyrinth of mud buildings, tree lines, deep wadis and ravines and canals and creeks. And, you know, it's not just flat agricultural field like the Midwest. Like it is a maze of infrastructure and stuff. And I think we counted like 13 or 14 explosions outside the wire, most of which we could see. It was an insane amount of combat activity. Helos flying over. We watched a couple A-10 strafing runs. Again, right outside the wire. It was like, this is like real deal Wild West war. I mean, it's going on right there, and we're headed right out there tomorrow. Whoa. I mean, it's just a huge mind trip. And there were a lot of market experiences just in those early days. My first time outside the wire, we were patrolling with the unit that we were going to replace. So it was just me and 3 other guys that were riding along, learning as we were going along. And we came up on another unit that took a 100+ pound IED, flipped the truck off the road, critically wounded 4 Marines. Those guys came under an ambush. On our way back, we almost took an IED to our truck, took small arms fire that almost killed the turret gunner that was in my truck. And we dropped a JDAM and 2 Hellfire missiles and killed 3 combatants. Very first patrol outside the wire, not even with our full unit. And in Sangen, fighting season was like an established thing. So in the spring through fall, whenever the trees really thickened out and there's more places to hide, essentially, foreign fighters would flood into the valley from all over Afghanistan and the surrounding world. We had fighters from Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Iran, Chechnya, and some other places that were flooding in to fight us. We weren't even there yet. And there was already this insane amount of volume. I mean, you just can't prepare for that. You know, you can, but I don't know.
There's a difference.
There's a difference. And until you're there experiencing it, it just hits you.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
those guys go ahead.
I was gonna say, you can't, prepare to the extent of getting shot at and getting hit with IEDs. You can prepare for the scenarios, but not the literal, effect of that. Something that you mentioned right in the beginning of, when I had asked, like, what, in terms of what happens next, you got there on your first day, you pointed out, the 30-mile by 2-mile radius.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people necessarily realize, like, whatever, not non-service members or non-veterans. I don't think they necessarily realize how difficult that is to kind of clear, maintain, hold, really any word you want to use there, as an infantry force, regardless of the terrain, right? I mean, even if it was literally just an open plain, like, I don't know people necessarily, like, kind of make that connection in terms of, like, how much terrain that really is when you're fighting, forces that are inherent to that land, when IEDs exist, when so on and so forth. So just wanted to kind of highlight that. And then especially so, as you pointed out, it's not a flat terrain at all. So that just creates an exponential, difficult kind of scenario for you guys to hold. How long of a transition period did you have with the existing unit before they completely left?
It was short. It was only a handful of days. And it's supposed to be longer than that. Typically, you do a RIP or relief in place for a week period or two. But we were late. Storms kept delaying us from flying into Afghanistan from Kyrgyzstan. And even when we did land, we came in a series of military planes, but we got diverted to Kandahar because the storms were so bad. So we did a very fast RIP. I mean, I think we went on 2 patrols with those guys over a 3 to 4 day period, and they were gone. And then we got handed 4 trucks, and told our mission set, and it was on. So it was a short period of time. And those first few weeks, we were just trying to get our feet underneath us because, we're brand new in the Valley. There's so much activity going on. There were different units and different operations in different, like, operational op tempos and methodologies. 2nd Recon was north in the Valley, who we eventually attached to. And they were doing more precise operations. They were doing helo raids on specific buildings. They were doing, typical recon stuff. They were doing a bunch of sniper hideouts. They were all over the place. 3-5 in the Southern Valley was just like nonstop presence and combat patrols within these particular areas, establishing new patrol bases and OPLPs. And then we were the quick reaction force up and down this main supply route adjacent to the Valley that ran the entire 30-mile distance, available on a moment's notice to anybody that came under an ambush for mounted gun truck support or foot support. It was just a spider web of activity in varying ways, and it took a while for us to kind of figure out our battlefield rhythm.
How long do you think, like, just that broad estimate?
So for the first few weeks, we always had 4 trucks on the road at all times throughout the day and night. We only had enough guys to man 2 squads, though. So we were on 12-hour shifts. And what I mean is, like, we would exit the wire at 6 a.m. and be out in enemy territory until 6 p.m. and where we drive back and then trade off with our other squad who would drive out, and they're out there. And we are up and down the road. We're checking possible IED locations that other units had sent to us. We are moving into a particular area to just survey the scene for a little while, try to get a feel for the pattern of life, who the locals were, who the locals weren't, the way that life was happening at different times in the day, what the norms were, just to try to set like a benchmark understanding of the way that things normally happen so that we could tell whenever something shifted, whenever enemy activity was present and there was a change in the pattern of life. But we kept hitting IEDs, and we were everyone else's quick reaction force, and we were also each other's quick reaction force. Right. So the other squad might be out for 6 hours. We had just gotten back, spent an hour or 2 getting the trucks prepped, cleaning weapons, eating a little bit, and then falling asleep for an hour. And then we get a call that they're bogged down in an IED and we have to go get them out of it. So we pick up and drive to wherever they're at, get them out of their situation. And by that time, we shifted over and they're back on the PV and now we're out. And so we were regularly going 24 hours, 36 hours with either no sleep at all or practically no sleep. And we kept hitting IEDs. I mean, it was just an unsustainable mission method. When it really shifted over and started making sense is we had taken 4 IEDs, numerous missed or close calls, almost engaged in several pretty hard-hitting ambushes and firefights on foot that were occurring in the valley. And the 4th IED was a very near, very, very close near miss. It had exploded just under the left rear tire of a MAV truck. And had it been a direct hit, it should have killed all 3 Marines inside. So we, I think our LT and platoon sergeant kind of went to the regional commands and we determined that rather than being up and down the entire main road, we're going to move up to where 2nd Recon is located at a place called Patrol Base Alcatraz and operate just in the worst area of road for IEDs north of that patrol base. 3-5 was stable enough in the southern valley to maintain their own quick reaction force in that area. We're going to be further north than all of the forward operating bases and just kind of tackle the worst part of the road for IEDs in the green zone, like the adjacent agricultural area that was enemy territory associated with that portion of road. And that was more controllable for a unit our size.
Mm. And how long of going into it, how long of a deployment was it supposed to be? And did it end up that length?
Yeah, it was a 7-month total deployment, and it ended up being 7 months. I mean, we're on rotation, but we weren't in Sangen for 7 full months. There came a time in early May, that 3-5 had left. 1st Battalion, 5th Marines took over for them. 2nd Recon was on their way out, and with 1-5 coming in, full force battalion, probably plussed up after realizing that they were coming into Sangen to take over for 3-5, who had sustained so many casualties. The original mission that we were set to do was the drug interdiction mission along the Iranian border out of a place called Fob Delaram. It's a broader topic, but heroin trade was huge in the war. 70% of the world's heroin at the time originated in fields in Afghanistan in this flowering plant called the poppy. And Sangen was a very heavy density of poppy growth because the Helmand River flowed through it. And the crop ground was very lush and able to sustain multiple harvests a year, I think, of poppy. So 50% of the Taliban's funding at the time was coming from poppy exports, which is raw opium that turns into heroin and other medicines all over the world. So that was the original mission that we were supposed to do, and it still needed to be done. The Georgian military had taken over kind of that presence out in the western portion of Afghanistan while we were in Sangen. When 1-5 came in full force, they decided to push us back out to our original mission, which was a pretty bitter decision for us. You know, for me personally, like, we were really vested in the battle for Sangen. You know, we had killed some guys, we'd lost some guys, we'd had a lot of close calls, but we were right on the forefront of the tussle, you know, in the most kinetic combat operating zone of that time, in a very consequential battle space. We're on the front line, and I didn't want to leave. Not because I loved the combat experiences or because I enjoyed killing or enjoyed the threat of dying. It's just because it was so meaningful. It was like, man, this is what we're here to do. We're fighting on behalf of what's right and good, and this is where the fight is. This is where we need to be. So
to get a kind of, can completely understand that. To get a kind of understanding of, I guess, like, mindset of pace or mindset of, you know, just like energy toward what the mission was day to day. What did you guys think? Like, how long was in your mind that you were going to be there in Sangen, you know, in the nitty gritty of things?
I thought we would be there the whole time.
Okay.
At the same time, though, I don't know that I really had a good concept of how long that would be. There were examples up to that point from both Iraq and Afghanistan of like major battle campaigns that lasted periods of time, like the Battle for Fallujah in Iraq. I think the second battle in November of 2004, Operation Phantom Fury, was probably one of the most consequential battle of the war in Iraq. And it was a huge initiative to go house to house. And I think it lasted a month or two. I mean, that's a lot of fighting in that month. The Tet Offensive in Vietnam, good example. I think that was a similar time frame. And then there were other major battles that had happened in previous wars and in these wars that had lasted various time frames. That I think the total campaign for Sangen was months and months and months. I mean, it was October 2010 clear into late 2011 where it was really intense fighting. So I don't know. I mean, I guess the expectation was we're going to be here until the enemy forces aren't, however long it takes. So
no, completely understand. You got order that you were going to shift back to a different line or a different mission set. I guess to that point, before we carry on, anything else you want to add for that, I guess, initial mission set?
Man, there's a lot of things that I could say. Maybe I would save some of them for the end of just kind of discussing war in general. I just maybe would give honor to the guys that were in Sangen. There was a lot of different units there. There were some incredibly heroic experiences. There were some very tragic experiences for a lot of the units that were there. Yeah, there's more to say. I'll go off on a tangent or five if I get started. I'll just give honor to anybody that was a part of that battle space because it was a real one.
All right, Landon, back from the break here. So you had left Sangen. What happens next from there?
Yeah, we pushed out of Sangen. We went to Camp Leatherneck for a few days to get some R&R. And it was the first time in a long time that we really actually had legitimate R&R. We hadn't showered hardly at all. We took showers probably once every couple weeks for a time period. Never washed clothes, relatively speaking. I mean, I would wring my socks out with water bottles and lay them on top of the truck to dry. I mean, we were very rough, and our trucks needed TLC. We needed rest. We're just very rough around the edges. So we had some time at Leatherneck, and it was great. Just kind of a decompression period for 4 or 5 days, maybe. It wasn't that long. And then we went out to Fob Delaram. Alpha Company, our parent company, was already there. And our other squad that had originally been detached from our platoon, from 2nd Platoon, was there. When we went to Sangin, they were tasked with what was called a jump mission, which is basically personal security for, I think, not the battalion commander, but Regimental Combat Team 2 commander. And I couldn't place how high up that is in the structure, but very prominent colonel. And they would fly around with him everywhere where he went as security detail, in addition to some other missions that they were running. So we got to see those guys again, which was great. We pulled up to Fob Delaram, and the area was different than Sangen. It's more arid and open, much more of a desert scape. There were some green spaces. There was a river flowing through, not far. There was a fair amount of elevation change, but a lot of just flat, open space. And we got there to start tackling drug exports. I mean, the general mission of identifying enemy forces, disrupting their activities, eradicating them in combat instances, like all of that was still the case. We still operated as a quick reaction force for that area, but different area. There wasn't as much like foot combat force on force taking place. It was more sporadic. The IEDs were still very prevalent, and there were a lot of experiences out there that were tough. There were some units that hit IEDs that we went to go provide quick reaction force for. There were ton of IEDs in Sangen also that we took EOD to. Somebody had found it, or we did. We would call up an explosive ordnance disposal team to come in and blow those improvised explosive devices in place. or we would defuse them, take them out into the desert, and then blow them with C4 that way. We did that a ton. We were taxiing other Marines and high value personnel from base to base, just doing all sorts of stuff. There were some bad occurrences that happened during that time period. There was a civilian bus that hit a huge IED that had 30 or 40 people on side and in the bus, and most of them were killed, women, children, and babies included. That was a very tragic experience. There were enemy forces out there were still very prevalent. They weren't quite as directly aggressive against us, but they were against our partner forces like the Afghan Highway Patrol, Afghan Highway Police, and Afghan Army. There were highway patrol outposts in different places that were a bit strung out and not very heavily manned. And they would get overrun in the night by Taliban and insurgent forces. There was one time that an Afghan highway patrol compound got overrun and the Taliban captured 10 or 15 guys, and they tortured and mutilated them over a period of time and dispersed of their body parts throughout the region or to the civilian populace for a week or two period, to just create fear and establish their dominance in the region. It's just brutal. Just very brutal experiences. And
was there a shift in kind of like mindset or morale? Not necessarily saying good or bad, just in any way from Sangin to this fob?
There was a big shift in the negative for me. I think there wasn't a lot of guys. Some of that had to do with just being in the environment after the halfway point through the deployment. I think everybody just kind of gets I'll say it this way. War like abrasively wears away the goodness in a person. It's the best way that I can frame it. You know, you just imagine sandpaper at your skin over and over and over again. Eventually you're going to get through the skin. I think everybody it just starts weighing on everybody, and a lot of negativity and hatred and despondency just kind of comes out across the board. In addition to, in Delaram, there was activity, but not a lot of direct activity. And it's hard to be in a combat environment and try to be like aggressively ready for combat, but not have any of it. Almost like, you know, we didn't sacrifice so much life and time and effort and commitment and hardship to come over here and be a security force. Like either put us in the war or send us home. And I think some of that mentality was tough out there. In addition to some of those more challenging experiences and dealing with the experiences that we had in Sangen that were really tough. You know, the guys that we had lost, and just the broader casualty rate of some of the other units that were around us. It got tough. I mean, there's definitely a shift in mentality, but I don't think it like went off the edge. Like nobody went crazy, relatively speaking. It didn't get into territory that it shouldn't get into.
Yeah, gotcha. Kind of like just a random question I just thought of. I don't know if this ever came up at the time or if you guys have ever thought of it. Was there any like thought or I don't know, strategy around potentially just burning down or removing these poppy fields in their entirety?
Yeah, there was. We couldn't do that because the locals were like it supported the local economy. Poppy in Afghanistan has been around for centuries. Well, a couple centuries, I think. I mean, I'm not super educated on this, so I don't want to speak too far out of turn, but
a long time.
Yeah, when the Brits were involved in Afghanistan way back when, the Opium Wars, as I think they're commonly referred to, from like the British Empire against the Chinese, that opium was coming from Afghanistan. It's been a part of life there since long before we ever got involved, and it supported the local economy. And so if we go wipe out their way of life, we're just creating more enemy fighters against us. It was just kind of a muddy way of fighting the war. It's like, the coin mission, the counterinsurgency was winning over the hearts and minds of the locals, giving them new opportunities to live a more prosperous life through modernization, new business opportunities and ventures, education on new technologies and new ways of doing things, while taking away the way of life that they had known prior to. It's just very muddy. If there were, when you think of war, you think like frontline force on frontline force, and then just going head to head and breaking through each other. Well, we went wherever we wanted to in Afghanistan. We were kind of there as soon as we wanted to be there. And then it became this cat and mouse game of trying to identify these guerrilla fighters that were waging a guerrilla warfare against our conventional forces. And it's just a muddy, weird mix.
Yeah.
Not an easy war to fight.
No, not at all. Sorry, that was that digression of where you're at. I just had
question.
That thought pop up.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like you're getting like toward the end of. I mean, I know you specifically said midpoint. I think that was when you got out of Sangin, really, generally speaking.
Give or take.
So right. So then I guess you kind of got toward the end of that deployment. So I guess carrying forward to that stage, what was kind of mindset around? All right, we're coming toward the end here. What was going on in that moment?
It was a very peculiar emotional time for me. The war was still going on, and I still wanted to be a part of it. But you have to, you got to take breaks. I think there was a ton of excitement to come home and see family, and come back knowing that we went over there and did what we went over there to do, and that we were successful in the ways that we needed to be, that we contributed to the war effort in really meaningful ways. And then we got to go home to our families to celebrate. I mean, it was a fun time from that standpoint. Another unit came to replace us. We ripped out with them, and I'd be remiss to not say it's in the book in vivid detail. It was a crazy experience that happened to our third squad who hit an IED. I mean, just catastrophic, chaotic experience that I got to, or that I was a part of, and the Marines that I was with. A miraculous, angelic experience as well, like just an awe-inspiring God moment that occurred during that episode that is just fascinating, that will mark me for the rest of my life with gratitude for God's protection over some guys. And so I just encourage you to check it out. I mean, you'll read it in the book if you get it, or listen to it. I wanted to plug that in there. Yeah, just emotional time. We got back to California after ripping with that unit, flying out of Afghanistan, and I just felt the height of great emotion of, pride in having deployed and fought in a war, achieved that milestone as a young Marine. I'd honored my heritage and my culture and, the Marines that had gone before me. But I also was so sad. The experiences that I took part in were so challenging. The war in general, it just turns you dark. One of my biggest struggles overseas was fighting hatred and bloodlust. You try to keep things very professional and not personal, but we're fighting an enemy that's actively hunting us. They are studying us and trying to find our weaknesses to exploit so that they can effectively kill us or torture us or, cut our heads off. I mean, whatever they can do to demoralize and, defeat us ultimately. We're actively hunting them right back. And we're tussling with one another day after day. And we can feel their adjustments to our adjustments and vice versa. And hatred just boils up in you. And I didn't have a problem with killing, but I struggled with like trying to fight the desire to want to kill. I just didn't want to allow my heart to get to a point that I was actively enjoying the destruction of other human beings. But that's where your mind and heart goes in wartime experiences. And I just think that God didn't create us to bear those burdens. I just think the war is a part of the fall of humanity, and that, it shouldn't be a part of humanity, although it is. So those are heavy struggles, and that affected me when I got back. I had a lot of sadness, as well as that I had given so much of my life to this, that prior to the deployment, like I talked about a minute ago, my mentality was that this is all that matters in my life right now. Yeah. Nothing else does. I'm not thinking about anything after. Whether or not I make it after, I'll deal with that if the time comes. But like, I'm fully committed to this. And then when we got back to California, it was all over.
Yeah.
And the guys that I was with was like, half these guys are going to get out after this deployment. Of the guys that stay in, we may or may not be in the same unit, but may or may not be doing the same things anymore. Like these relationships are going to, fade to the extent that they do. I mean, some of them are lifelong, of course, but it's just a tough time. As well as coming back into the civilian world after being a part of that experience in the Marine Corps and combat forces, your whole life and world evolves around killing people in a very intentional way. I mean, what you're graded on from a performance standpoint, the way that you gauge yourself as being better than the next guy, the way you advance and get promoted, what is considered most honorable. I mean, oftentimes our heroes, the guys we looked up to, were the guys with the highest body counts. And so all of life evolved around carefully studying other human beings, trying to figure out their weaknesses to exploit, demoralizing, dehumanizing them, and killing them as effectively as possible. Then you come back into the civilian world, and that's first-degree murder by definition. And so it's like, man, you did so great. You spent your time and your effort. You built yourself into this killer, but now you need to never do that again.
Yeah.
Or you're like a murderer, like a real deal, definitional lunatic serial murderer. And that's so taboo and not honorable. That's actually kind of the worst thing that you could possibly be. So don't think like that anymore. It's like, well, how are you supposed to flip that switch?
Yeah.
It's just a weird moral, ethical dilemma. You cross these lines that you think you'll never cross in an honorable way that is like, we're fighting evil. It's a good thing. But then you come back and the adjustment back is, don't ever think that way again.
Yeah.
I mean, I had such a hard time.
This is, I guess, like year 5, 6 out of 8.
Yeah. Year 5, coming up on 6. And it just takes time. I couldn't argue with people for a long period of time. I just had to come back and chill out and cool down. I think the other thing, more practically speaking, your body, you get you physiologically change to the environment that you're in. Mm-hmm. One of the amazing things about humanity's adaptability. And so you come back, my body, everyone's used to these massive adrenaline surges and depletions from, we're hanging out on base and all of a sudden we're getting mortared and it's a life and death situation. And then 30 minutes after the mortar attack, we're going right back to watching a movie again. Yeah. And so just that period of adjustment, I think it just takes time. It takes time, good community, good support group, good resources, and it looks a little bit different for everybody, I think. But I settled back down. It just took time and community to do so.
Yeah, it certainly does take time. So you get back, I guess you're integrating back into like school. Like what do you have going on outside of duty?
I took numerous months off. I didn't really know where I was going in life, what I was doing. My plan had always been to be, career long military guy. That was still the plan at that time. I think, I'd planned on like, all right, once I'm ready, I'll go back to school. I'll get back into the PLC program, or I'll just finish school and then go to OCS afterwards, and then start my military career. And so I just took time. And one of the things that helped me an incredible amount during that season was my faith. And it helped me throughout the whole deployment. I was a real, sincere Christian ahead of deploying, during the deployment, and certainly after. And connecting back to the big picture has always been a sustaining grace for me. I mean, that's a huge piece of advice that I would give is like, we go through some crazy experiences in this life, but if we just take a step back and remember, when I would sleep under the stars at night in the field, in the Marine Corps, and in Afghanistan, it would give me such peace because I look up at the stars at night and I see everything that is out there that is known. And I just remember like, whoa, like these experiences are so small compared to everything that is. And we are a part of this divine eternal story, and that life is just a chapter, of this bigger, broader picture that's being put to play. And, from a biblical perspective, God created me as a human being to be a part of his family. And this life that I'm living is just a chapter as a part of a broader eternal life. And man, it just gave me such peace anytime I would really struggle. It still does today. Connecting back to the big picture. So that season of life, once I got back and dropped back into the reserve unit, was comprised of a lot of that. Heavily involved in a number of ministries, went very deep in biblical study and prayer, and it was great. And that translated into a college degree. Philosophy and theology, like the undergirdings of all these life experiences that we have as human beings. That field of study it helped me out a lot. So I started a bachelor's degree in biblical studies, theology, philosophy at Dallas Baptist University with the intent of going back into the Marine Corps as an officer full time. Doesn't matter what type of degree you get. You just have to have a degree to be an officer. Yeah. So that was great. Also had some thoughts of going into ministry at the time. I'd just come back from being in the Marine Corps that was very meaningful, and being involved in ministry and helping people in a very sincere spiritual way, and practical life ways, lifelong also resonated. It's like, I'm going to live my life for purpose. And once I graduated, I got married. The wars were dying down. My body wasn't in great shape. Ripped out my shoulder in Afghanistan and just had typical wear and tear from carrying the combat loadouts for the amount of time that we did, and getting no sleep, eating terrible, drinking plastic-filled water bottles, being under high stress environments. Yeah. The prospect of going back in just became not great. So my wife and I decided to make a change, went back to school for business to figure out where to take life next. And that kind of started me down the path that I'm on today.
So at what point did you I guess you alluded to that now in terms of like thinking about, I guess finishing your service, right? You getting to that 8-year mark. I guess hone in on that time frame specifically, like walk us through that process for you.
Obama had put in a military sequester. The wars were dying down, and he wanted to shrink the military. And so units like ours were pushing out the more senior guys to save salary, essentially. So 123, they're progressively once guys had hit the end of their 6-year contract, it was getting harder and harder to stay into that unit. They were letting those contracts fall off. So I dropped into the inactive reserve. Along with the majority of my generation of sergeants. I picked up sergeant after I got back, which was fantastic, and just kind of continued scaling billets in that unit as a fire team leader and squad leader and platoon guide, platoon commander, and really enjoyed that. At the same time, I didn't know that staying in the reserves was conducive to my intended civilian life and building a family and career. If I wasn't going to be in the military active duty full time, I had served in my war that was now coming to an end. So I thought continued to last for a very long time. But I dropped into the inactive reserve and just kind of figured it out. There did come a time that my old unit, 14th Marines, called me and said that they needed some guys. And so I reactivated for a number of months to go and just be a part of that unit. I extended my contract past the 8-year mark to try to keep my foot in the door, because I was still on the fence, still really wanted to be in active duty. And I thought, well, I'll go do this for a little while, try it out. And that experience just kind of sealed the deal that it was time to move on. So reluctantly, I got out.
And I guess because of that drawdown, another overseas deployment didn't kind of come up on your cycle?
There were some guys that went to the nation of Georgia to train the Georgian military. And that I could have gone on that deployment, but it wasn't combat, and I didn't really want to be frank. Sure. There were some other type deployments that were happening, but they were all active duty. I guess another thing is, after being in a combat force specifically, I didn't really want to do anything else.
Sure.
And going back in as an officer and being a platoon commander of a fresh, able-body infantry platoon, I just questioned the validity of. My shoulder was in bad shape at the time. Like I struggled to keep a rifle up. And the thought of being a platoon commander in this fresh-bodied platoon and not being able to lead well was not a good prospect. I just wouldn't do that. And I knew, like, I didn't respect the platoon commanders that weren't the best of us. And I just knew I couldn't be that. And I wasn't interested in doing anything else. So there may have been some other opportunities, but they weren't readily available in front of me. I would have to really go seek them out. And just getting married and, starting kind of a new direction in life, it just wasn't conducive anymore.
Gotcha. Yeah. What did you do about your shoulder?
PT. I mean, I went to go see a surgeon. I had an MRI when I got back to Camp Pendleton. I almost got sent home from the deployment, but I didn't want to cut it short. So just kind of suffered it out. But at the same time, we weren't doing like heavy combat activities during the, that part of the deployment anyway. The surgeon told me it's 50-50. He said, we could do surgery and it might not help at all. That if you're functional, you should just tough it out. And so that's what I did. I'm not sure if it was the right decision or not, but I just avoid activities that aggravate it. Yeah. It's still strong enough, still strong enough. I'll just say that.
Yeah. So. Got you. Okay. So you finish in with service. You're going back to school now for business. So I guess I'm saying this as a thought process, trying to like think of your timeline here. And I'll give you the context is, I know for me, when I went into a school environment post-service, it was really difficult. That said, it sounds like you were already in a school environment. So maybe you were kind of like, familiar with the dynamic, right, for your first degree prior. So rolling into business, was it different now that you finished service, or were you already kind of, you just knew what it was like?
The bachelor's degree was hard because I had just gotten back from the war. It had been 10 months or so. And I started that degree, and it was hard culturally. I didn't mesh well with the college community just because I had come out of this very violent experience and it didn't resonate with any of them. And going back to what we talked about on the front end, I was really afraid, like, I'm going to scare people and I'm going to label myself as this lunatic if I come open about any of this stuff. But I also had a hard time, like, just, doing the college thing and being into what everybody was into. When I got back from the war, I stopped caring about a lot of things that, like sports, I had just zero concern. Hunting. I grew up hunting and I loved hunting. I don't love it to the extent that I used to. It's not that I have any hang up with guns or anything. It's just, I just lost interest. I love the outdoors, love being outside, love taking my kids hunting, that type of thing. But there's just a bunch of stuff that I just didn't care about. The stuff that those college students cared about and were into, and, cars and society and pop culture. And I'm just like, none of that matters. Like, you want to see the real world? Like, go to where I just came from. That's what the real world is. All this stuff is just superficial. And that's not a super fair assessment. It's just the way I felt at the time. But I just went head heavy into my studies. I did 15 to 18 hours every semester. And that became what got me through it. Was I had a new thing to focus my drive and attention and aggression on. And I think that's a big piece of advice. That's what pulled me out of some dark places is the Marine Corps meant everything to me. I had to find something else to grab hold of so I could let go of the Marine Corps because I just didn't have it anymore. And so study became that. And I found a new love for learning. And I didn't really get college prior to the deployment, but afterwards I started making straight A's, and most of them were A+ because I just came back from war where mission is first every time. You die before you don't complete the mission. You complete the mission, you take care of your gear, you take care of your other personnel, and then you worry about yourself. And so, like, you get your mission set, you go complete the mission, or you die trying to complete that mission. And then that translated into college where, like, they said, read the chapter and do the exercise. I read the whole chapter and I did the exercise. And my first semester, I made straight A's, which I had never done before in my whole life. And I thought, I could actually be a smart guy. Like, The whole time, all I had to do was what they told me to do. It blew my mind. And I graduated summa cum laude, 4.0 with my bachelor's and a 3.9 with my grad degree because I figured out the trick. You just do what the smarter person tells you to do, and it works out.
That's great. So this you kind of just touched on it in a few different ways, actually. But so coming now into this transition period, military duty and now transitioning into civilian life full time. Give us some, obviously this is all hindsight advice on transitioning for other service members or veterans that are listening.
Yeah, I don't sit idle. I think you have to find something to grab hold of during that. I don't know that it's the right thing for everybody, but during that time period, I was trying to engage with some different veteran groups in the area that I knew of. And after several months of trying, I realized it was very counterproductive. I had to fully detach. And that doesn't mean that I cut off the guys that I deployed with or anything like that. Like I still had very strong relationships there, but being a part of this veteran organization that's still trying to do military-esque things in that organization and that one, they were counterproductive because they were still trying to live cultural norms in the military that had no application to the civilian life. Like you were a gunnery sergeant or a captain or a lieutenant colonel in the military, but you're a civilian now. Your name's Jeff. It's not lieutenant colonel, whatever. And I need you to just be a human being and for us to be brothers, not you're still the lieutenant colonel over my life type thing. I just had to detach from it all. And, but again, the advice is find something else to grab hold of and drive hard into. And that helped focus my attention and give me purpose and give me a reason to stay disciplined and to stay away from bad habits that could take me down dark paths. It helped out a lot. I don't think I would have been successful at all without my faith. I think the testimony of Jesus in my life is the most important factor. And that's worth talking about in detail, but more practically speaking, don't sit idle. That's really what helped me out a lot. And then the bridge over into the business life was developing hard skills. Advancing in a career. Maybe I could just go into that if you want me to.
Yeah, I was gonna just say, I think in a practical sense, religion certainly can be practical. I mean, it's both. It's spiritual, it's a lot of things, right? But it is also practical, whereas it gives you kind of a boundaries, right? I mean, it just gives you kind of how to live a life. So yeah, it's a great way to put it. Both having that new mission set with school and actually paying attention and applying yourself. So on a day-to-day basis, and then you also had religion to fall back on essentially, per se. So carrying forward, I'm curious how you, got into industry, right? What happened that, brought you that direction?
Yeah. My wife and I got pregnant I think I was maybe a semester or two into business school. And the whole point of business school was hey, let's figure out what I'm good at. And what I enjoyed that I can apply into, a career. We got pregnant and I needed income. So I spent 6 months applying to jobs and interviewing. I applied to almost 70 different places, or did 70 different applications. Maybe that was or maybe it was 70 different places, but I had 26 interviews. And I learned a lot throughout that time period to try to figure out how to market myself and figure out translatable skills in the military. At first, I just didn't know how to bridge that gap. And toward the end of it, I got really good at bridging the gap because I had so many conversations. The military, you develop a ton of soft skills, great soft skills, translatable soft skills. But in most circumstances, you have zero hard skills. And what the job market wants is hard skills. They don't want somebody that's going to step into a management position that knows nothing about the industry that they're stepping into. They want you to come up through the ranks knowing the hard skill. If you're going to be in finance, you need to have started working in Excel workbooks at the bottom as an analyst and work your way up. If you're going to be a project manager, you need to start as a part of a project management team and learn the process and how it happens to work your way up. The military, you come out with a ton of team leadership and the ability to work in a team and mesh in a team. You know how to follow orders and follow people. You also know how to lead and lead people within a hierarchical structure, which is great skill. You know how to plan strategically, communicate effectively, communicate in a structured way. You know how, like, there's a ton of stress conditioning and perseverance and long suffering where you can suffer through something for a long period of time and maintain bearing and tactical advantage. And, like, there's a ton of skills, but those are all qualitative soft skills. Those are the things that help you advance faster than your competition in your career, faster than your counterparts.
Yeah.
And like have a really big impact in the business environments that you're in. But you have to know the business, like you have to know the hard skill, which is you're an engineer or a designer in the context of real estate, or you're a finance person, or you really know construction, or you're an environmental consultant of sorts. Like you have to know the subject matter, the nomenclature of that business. So the way that I broke in, if you will, in that interviewing time period, I figured that the military is very project management structured, and it is. You get your mission that aligns with your commander's intent. You plan a sequence of operations. You pull in the right team members and the right assets to go execute that mission effectively. You plan a sequence of events. You have contingencies. You have timelines. And then you go execute. And then you come back afterwards and you debrief and you figure out what could have been done better. And you go do another one and another one and another one. And that's very translatable into project management leadership. And at that time, I thought, well, if I have a career in project management, or at least as a start, IT or construction are kind of the two big industries that's directly applicable. And construction was just more interesting. So I started reaching out to some of the bigger firms in the area, went to some job fairs and stuff. And I connected with a company called the Beck Group, which is a very well prominent, established, like tier one design build general contractor in Dallas. Very historical company, been around for 100 years probably in Dallas, built a third of the skyscrapers that are standing right now. And I sold that, hey, I'm a high skilled project manager based on this military experience. I can handle very tough conversations, difficult argumentative environments, challenging problems. I'm adaptable, innovative, like I can think through these things. And I have a strong aptitude and ability to learn. As these degrees in my GPA would attest to. If you'll just teach me construction, I can be effective for you. And they took a shot on me that awesome. I will always be grateful for. It gave me the opportunity to be in an environment that I could grow and thrive. And it was a rocky start. I mean, it took a year for me to really start understanding even the language of the construction industry, which is just as foreign to normal vernacular as the military is. There's acronyms and names for things that are not logically, that like, they don't make any sense at all. Like, what is the slump of concrete? Like, you have no idea what that is, or, the cement water ratio and how that factors in. And so it just took learning, but the hard skill development.
For sure. What I always like to say on like a, to bring it to like a civilian perspective is, imagine you're working, I don't know, marketing for the past 8 years, and now you just went into accounting, right? Like vernacular is different, skill set's different. You just got to learn it. Granted, you should be able to apply some, if you had managerial, experience, you should be able to transfer that as a soft. Yeah, for sure. So out of curiosity, going back to when you mentioned applying to all these different positions, getting 20 something, whatever it was, like that, it's more than 5, call it, right? That's a lot of interviews. That's not easy to do. Like, what's your advice to veterans who, listening to that, in terms of like how you were able to acquire that many?
Great question. Start somewhere and build out your knowledge base as you go along. And that's my advice for anything in life. I have implemented that in so many ways where, like, I know very little or nothing about this topic. I'm going to call somebody cold, or call 5 people that know a little bit about this topic, take really good notes, ask a lot of really good questions. And then I'm going to take that conversation and generate new questions that give me a little bit more depth on that topic, and then call somebody else. And now I'm starting with a little bit of knowledge base. And I've done that so many times. And today I know very little or nothing about a particular topic. And a week from now, I've got a great foundational handle on whatever it is that I'm
Mm-hmm.
going into. And so I took that with like resume writing and how to translate skill sets from the military over. The internet and AI today is
Yeah.
so powerful that it doesn't take a ton of time to research and try to put together
Yeah.
a good packet of knowledge for whatever it is that you're studying. And then bouncing that off of people in the industry that do know, that's like the check. And it's remarkably easy to get a hold of people that are open to just have a conversation with you. It's so non-threatening to go to somebody and say, hey, I'm in need of help. You strike me as somebody that could help me. Would you be open to just a 30-minute phone conversation with me? I just want to pick your brain and ask questions.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to help me? I mean, 80% of people you ask are going to say yes, completely cold.
Yeah.
And it's happened to me over and over and over again. And that's how I tackled it.
That's
And
awesome.
those interviews that I went into and the jobs that I was applying for they were all over the map. And I got a couple job offers that were just not jobs that I wanted, like not career long-term jobs. Like I remember one, I was it was a sales job for miscellaneous products with a marketing agency where I would go and stand in a Sam's Club or Costco and try to sell things. Like
Tough.
yeah.
Tough.
And I was desperate enough that I almost took jobs like that, but I just thought this is not the scalable thing that I want to do long term. So I just kept sharpening my presentation and bridging those gaps. And then the other thing through that learning process is you start learning what gaps you have between where you are and where you want to get to. And then it's also not hard to figure out what I need to do to bridge those gaps. So in the case of project management with Beck, one of the things that I sold the company on is, hey, I may not know construction, but I can give you a direct example of how I can plan out and execute a project. And I did it. They said, submit something to us. So I went back and put together a full mission plan that I had done in training after Afghanistan, what the objectives were, what the risks were, what the contingencies were, the full gear pack out list, the unit elements that were going to tackle it, the sequence of events that they were going to do it with. I mean, down to the vivid detail, the number of batteries that each person was going to carry for their NVGs in the event they got strung out for a period of time. Like I just displayed
That's awesome.
that I can do this. I just need to learn how it's done building a building. And that translated really well.
Yeah.
I couldn't have done that day one, but asking questions, making phone calls, building out a knowledge base. Eventually I got to the point that I'm like, I know how to translate this experience over to your experience. Let me show you.
Yeah.
And that just got to take a step forward and then another step and just build out the knowledge base.
No, that's awesome, man. I love that story. You're able to leverage project management skills literally to acquire that job. That's really cool.
Yeah. Worked out great.
Awesome.
Really did.
So as you get started at Beck Group, kind of walk us through how you go from that arena to where you're at today.
Yeah, I started at Beck, but I was still in grad school for business, and I loved economics and finance. That's just where my mind likes to go. I really enjoy the market analysis and financial feasibility and risk profiling and all the things, all the economic mental processes that go into big level investing. When I started at Beck, I pretty quickly realized like I want to be on the economic side of the business.
Sure.
I'm great at executing this work, but I want to get involved in the deal making side. And so I started building relationships with our marketing director at the time. And I said like, hey, I enjoy this work, but I'm not going to be a project manager for 20 years. I would like to start pursuing jobs and be on the business development side at some point. Would you let me stay in project management long enough to build up a skill set to where I know how all this works, and then transfer over into chasing new clients and building out business? And that was kind of the track that I was on. That did not flesh out in the time frame that I wanted it to. And so I got to the point that I was like, all right, I'm probably moving on. And Beck was a great company. I was interested in the type of opportunity that Beck wasn't going to be able to provide me. So I started trying to identify, well, where am I going next? And real estate development was, with private equity, was definitely the target,
Right.
because it checked those boxes. I had sufficiently developed a good baseline skill set in construction sciences, how buildings come together, how the architect, engineering, construction industry operates, how it works, how the contracts operate, where the risks are, sequence of events, and the way things get negotiated, and everything. Like I had a pretty good foothold after 4 years working as a project manager, doing numerous types of projects. And so I knew I wanted to break into real estate. So once again, I'm in a position where, like, I know where I want to be and I know where I am, and there's a gap that I need to bridge. So I went and got a real estate license. I started studying real estate. I just using the resources available. And again, it's remarkably simple to do this.
Yeah.
It's just building out a knowledge base. Start Googling and then start making phone calls and buy a book or 2 or 3 and study and frame out a profile of what a real estate developer does, what they need to do, what they, the skill set they need to employ, and then network and build out relationship with people, that could ultimately lead to that. So an opportunity arose after a period of time doing just that, kind of preparing for where I wanted to be. And that was with a company called Brookfield, which is a huge asset manager that is heavily involved in real estate development. They were building out a logistics platform here in DFW that was going to oversee central US development for industrial logistics. And they had an opening, and I interviewed for it and was impressive enough to get an offer. So, but that all happened because I had already been spending time preparing for it before the opportunity ever came. And if that opportunity hadn't come, I would have gotten to a point that I would have started to source opportunities and actually be active in trying to find the right spot. But as soon as I knew I needed to cultivate an additional skill set, I started. And then again, the opportunity came along and I was ready for it because I had already kind of started down the path.
That's awesome. How long, like, just rough estimate, do you think you took to kind of learn, get that foundation understanding to when Brookfield popped up?
Not long. I mean, 6 months.
Yeah. Wow.
Top.
That's awesome.
I didn't have to know everything. You pick up things as you go. I didn't take on a senior VP position at Brookfield. I was an associate. I had a VP over me who also had come from the construction world, and only 6 months before I did. And he was a very skillful guy, just with more experience in construction. But we tackled everything as a 2-man team. He was my boss, but we tackled everything together, and we learned as we went along. And we sourced knowledge and education similar to the way I'm describing it to get in that position in the first place. Just had a ton of conversation and did some certifications, or went through some training courses, some industry training courses that are available outside, and learned deal by deal how everything went. Just ask a ton of questions, be humble, and learn from the people that are around us. And we're very successful. I think we completed more than 10 big level developments in central US across Dallas, Austin, Houston. There's one up in Chicago that I think is now moving forward that we're involved in. Have some other land holdings that that I think those guys are still executing on. It's a great experience. And those each of those deals, probably the smallest of those was 30 million, 30 million in total. Had some really big deals, some $100 million plus deals that we were developing. So great experience.
That's awesome. So now that you kind of set the foundation of kind of how you started, I'm curious how, to hear or learn how you got from associate to VP in that time frame.
Yeah. So a few things that I want to say. There's one of the things that a good piece of advice that I would give. I remember the CEO of Beck coming in and giving a educational moment with some of the people that were in the room at the time on how to scale a career properly. And he talked about a T-shaped career, where obviously a T has a vertical leg and then a horizontal leg. And the big argument during that time is that if you want to, like, the right way to scale a career, especially in the big corporate world, is develop a hard skill in a specified fashion, like be a specialist, not a generalist.
Mm-hmm.
And through that specialty, rise up in a company or in an industry. And then eventually you become more of a generalist. Mm-hmm. And you have a broader footprint over the business and over a broader span of the business. Most people, like me at the time, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I just kind of had a generalist approach. I've got a good basis of general skills that I could apply in a bunch of different places. Now looking back, it was way the wrong mentality. I mean, when I'm hiring today, I'm looking for somebody to do a specific set of tasks. I don't need somebody to run the business. Right. I'm running the business. My bosses are running the business. I need somebody to do a particular stack of tasks within that broader business plan that I'm executing on, and to do it really well that I don't have to worry about them because they've got it. Yeah. And so having that specialty approach makes a really big difference. Well, that's how I've done well in my career. I have been given my areas of responsibility, and I have sought to do them so exceptionally well, even if they didn't really interest me. If there were other parts of the business that interested me more, I just tried to ignore that for a little while and be so good at tackling whatever it is that has been put in front of me that that opens up doors for more opportunity. Yeah. The people that would see me executing those things really well in a way that exceeded expectations that they didn't have to worry about, inevitably there's another opportunity that pops up, and they're like, who is somebody dependable that we know could tackle this initiative? And they're like, Landon has done everything that we've given him so well, and exceeded our expectations. He could definitely handle it. Let's give him a shot. And that's how it's happened. Humble. I've tried to be a very, very solid team player. A piece of life advice that I tell myself all the time is one of my highest priorities is to make everyone around me successful. Like that I am a part of their success. I go out of my way in a servant-hearted way to like make other people successful. And if you do that, you become indispensable to everybody because you make their life better. They will look at you and think, my life and career and success is better when this person is a part of it. I always want them to be here and involved. And that's job security. I mean, that keeps you on board during down markets because they're like, we've got an A player that always goes out of their way to do things that nobody asks them to do, or things that nobody wants to do, but they tackle it and they do it better than anybody expects that they would have. Why would we ever let go of somebody like that? Not mentioning that's what the Bible says is honorable. Jesus came and he said that I came to serve, not to be served. In spite of him having, being like the Son of God, this incredibly prominent position, he didn't lord that over people. He came and said, I am the highest, therefore I have the highest expectation is on me to be the greatest servant. That's the most honorable thing you can do. The more prominence you have, the more power, the greater servant you should be to the people around you on your team. And that has helped me excel exceedingly fast in my career, going out of my way to put my team first, to make sure that they're successful, even if I have to work more to ensure that, and be humble, hungry, and smart. That's a good framework.
That's awesome. I mean, it's certainly a longer term sustainable way of, establishing yourself and growth versus like some quick action insight that, it probably wouldn't do anything anyway. So that's awesome. As you put it, life advice, really, really cool. So talk to us about kind of like what you're doing today, broadly speaking, whatever you can share, and what you're focused on and what you're kind of like excited about.
I was at Brookfield for almost 3 years and great experience, great team there. I had still great friendships with the guys there and gals. I mean, we just had an awesome time building out this platform for this huge company. But an opportunity came along that I wasn't expecting to take on a VP position with another company that is somewhat a competitor. but operates a little bit differently. And that's Clearing Partners, where I'm at now, and have been here for a couple of years. Took on a vice president position here and started overseeing central US and Western US development. And so that's major markets everywhere in that region. I've had deals up in Portland, in Northern California, Southern California, Reno, Vegas, Phoenix, Dallas, Austin, Houston, Denver. Just some really cool, like, broadened experiences to go and be a part of in these different markets that operate differently. And it was just such an expansive opportunity that it felt like the right one to take. And it's been great so far. So here now, whenever I came on board, it was me and a senior VP that overlapped in Central and West Coast. And we have since started to kind of bifurcate. So I've pulled out of California entirely. He now completely oversees California and Vegas, and he's taken over the Pac Northwest. I've got a deal that's wrapping up there, and then I'll pull out of there. And he's completely out of Central. And so now I've got all Central US, and Midwest is probably coming my way before long. We've got some stuff that we're looking at up in Cincinnati, Columbus, and Minneapolis. Another couple cities up there, Chicago. We've got some active stuff. So industrial logistics is still the focus. Clearing Partners is one of the top 3 owners of industrial space across the U.S. Very big, prominent owner. It's an $80 billion company. And a major vehicle for us from an investment standpoint is new development. And that's where the opportunity for me came on board, is going and helping source and close on and execute on these, big real estate development ventures. So
that's awesome. What are, for people that are, I guess, not familiar with that process, really, finding, sourcing and closing on deals, what are your key indicators that you look for?
I would think about it remarkably simple. I mean, it is very complex, and there's a lot of analysis that goes into it, but in a very understandable way. Maybe just taking the Metroplex, DFW Metroplex as an example, there are projections, widely known and materialized projections of but population growth in Dallas-Fort Worth over the next 10 to 20 years. I think currently we have north of 8 million people. That's supposed to swell to 12 million people by 2040 or 2050. Well, there's a ton of real estate growth that's needed to go with that population growth. That's that many more houses that need to come in. The infrastructure needs to be improved to support that. The amenities and the retail businesses that need to be around, it's going to have to support that. The flow of products into and around DFW is going to swell massively. All of that creates demand for real estate. And so, very simply put, I mean, if me and you were housing developer, we would not want to go and build new houses in a city that's population is shrinking. We would want to be in a city that is growing, because there's an inherent need for additional housing. It's really kind of as simple as that. And then the specifics around what type of building, what size of building, what tenants, on the commercial industrial side, like what the tenant uses are, what tenants want to be in what markets for what reasons, what their design parameters are for these buildings. You really dial it in, but high level, it's just macroeconomics is what drives the business.
Cool. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Obviously easy to understand. Are there any specific I guess niches, I don't know if it's necessarily niche, but just specifics within industrial that you're focused on or excited about?
I would say there are some major market drivers that are that are having an impact in the industrial business. Onshoring of critical manufacturing, that's been a really big topic, widely publicized over the last couple of years. Just with geopolitical tensions, there's a major initiative on the federal level to bring in manufacturing back to the U.S. Those are specialized uses. Those manufacturers need very big, very high-powered, very stout buildings to do manufacturing inside of, which is an industrial logistics space or an industrial building, very similar to the logistics operations. When a population swells, you just imagine every product that is around you in the room that you're sitting in right now. before it got to your house, it was sitting in a store somewhere,
Yeah.
maybe. Before the store, it was sitting in a warehouse, an industrial building. Before that building, it was sitting in another one, and probably in another one. And then it was in a box on the ocean getting shipped here. So there's this infrastructure across the US of highways and distribution facilities or industrial logistics facilities that houses the flow of products across the whole nation, from wherever they're originally produced all the way to the end consumer, wherever they may be. I heard a metric a couple years ago, and I don't know if I remember it definitively accurate, but the scale should be pretty accurate. And it was like, for every 1% of domestic product purchasing that goes from brick and mortar stores, so from a storefront, to online sales. So instead of buying your Nike shoes at a Foot Locker, you're buying them online on Amazon. Mm-hmm. For every 1% of sales, there's 10 million square feet of additional warehouse space that's needed somewhere in the US to house that e-commerce. So e-commerce is a major driver, and there's a ton of demand for warehouse space just for that. And then in the population centers, well, even in more rural places, there's a lot of buildings that are just old and they don't work anymore.
Right.
Technologies have advanced. There are robotics in a lot of these distribution facilities and manufacturing facilities that need concrete slabs that are profoundly more flat and stout than the stuff that was built in the 80s. Mm-hmm. Racking, products are stored 40 feet high now. Mm-hmm. Because of forklifts have gotten so good and strong that they can reach all the way up to pull a pallet off 40 feet high in the air. Well, a lot of the buildings are tapped out at 20 feet. Yeah. And the HVAC requirements are different, and the energy requirements are different. And so there's a lot of old stock of buildings that are just going to have to get replaced, and with new modern buildings that are built to support new modern technologies. Yeah. There are drone facilities. I mean, there's distribution facilities that have drones delivering packages to and from. Amazon has got a lot of that stuff going on. And so all of those bigger, broader, new advances in the way that distribution happens has direct implications in the industrial logistics space. And we're certainly on the forefront of all of that, trying to build these buildings for tenants, where tenants want them, how tenants want them, so that these distribution companies and manufacturing companies can ultimately be successful in their operation.
Yeah.
That's a business.
That's fascinating. I love to learn about all of the things that I don't know, and this is a part of that circumstance, right? The logistics behind all of what you use is really incredible. And obviously what you're doing is a part of that. Yeah, absolutely. So I know you did actually, like, in a very literal sense, highlight this, but I want to just specifically plug it, which is translatable skills. Now that we're kind of, where you're at in your career, so military to built environment. Some top translatable skills that come to mind.
I will go back to the soft skills. The hard skills are difficult, but a caveat is there are some hard skills that do directly translate. I mean, if you're going from the military to a defense contractor, and let's just say you were in the Air Force working on guided missile systems. Well, Lockheed Martin built those systems. Like that, there's some very direct hard skill translation. Yeah. But how fast I can disassemble and reassemble an M249 squad automatic weapon in a duress situation bears no resemblance to any experience in, a built environment. So it's the soft skills that really matter a lot. Yeah. I think if you can bridge the gap effectively with developing even just a start to a hard skill, and then you can effectively communicate all the soft skill development, you put yourself in a really competitive position. Yeah. There's, team leadership, structured planning, like we talked about, structured communication, being able to execute a mission in a sequential fashion, factoring contingencies, a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about, as well as just being a good team member, knowing how to follow and lead at the same time. You can work as a part of a team, but you can go tackle initiatives on your own and have the command and drive to be able to do that. Those are all developmental skills and conditions that we cultivate in the military. And all of them, like the business world, once they see those things in action, I've heard over and over and over again how much people love military personnel because of those attributes. but they have to be able to do the hard skill as like a threshold issue. They got to be able to get their foot in the door by knowing that hard skill. There's a piece of advice that one of my professors gave me one time. They said, very quickly after you get into a new position, whatever that position is, try to identify the next one that you want so that you know where you're going, so that you're doing your job in your current position. But if you know where you're trying to head, and you have that in the back of your mind, you'll realize that there are new opportunities to like build out your skill set in a more intentional way to get to that next position. And so if you're getting out of the military soon, if you're like I was, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And that set me back from being able to transition into a business role quicker. But even if you don't know what you want to do forever, if you can identify a hard skill that you can go and start getting yourself a good knowledge base of, know how to do, maybe you can use that hard skill to like just take the next step that could then help you get closer to where you ultimately want to be. I think you just got to develop some hard skill, which it's not easy to identify. But I think once you do have a target in mind, today's access to information, it is not hard to develop. Yeah. You just have to kind of be gung-ho and take initiative and go get it done.
Yeah, totally. So, and have something to strive toward is also really helpful and really in any setting. So yeah, well said. And I want to add, because just that is a great story, is technically the project management skill that you took to get your job at Beck, which was like your literal plan, right? Creating a plan. Yeah. That's underrated, right? I mean, you literally leverage that toward getting a job. So that's awesome.
Big time. Yeah, big time.
Awesome. So before we close out here, anything that we're going to move on to like kind of final questions. So if it comes up after, cool, by all means, but anything that you missed, you want to add?
I just as a general reiteration, be humble. That's good advice for life. Like anytime I have been a part of a hiring team or directly hired anybody, I'm looking for a very low ego person. Nobody wants to be around an egotistical person, entitled individual. The best, smartest teams that I have worked with have been very low ego, high drive individuals. Be humble. And just like being in the military and being a part of a team, like you have a role to play and you are supportive to every role around you. There's this book called The Ideal Team Player. It's a pretty good book, but the framework within the book is fantastic. And it basically identifies the ideal team player as somebody that's humble, hungry, and smart. It's 3 simple attributes that you can very easily aim towards. And if you can communicate that and embody that, be smart enough to learn new things, be humble, low ego, like somebody that other people would just generally enjoy being around, and be hungry, be driven, want to get somewhere, want to be a part of a team's success. Who doesn't want somebody like that around them and on their team? Man, it matters a lot. I mean, the low ego, I just can't stress that enough. We spend more time with the people that we work with often than we do our families. And so while there definitely is this like, who can do this job and do it very well aspect of it, there's also is this the type of human being I want to spend hours and hours every day with? And that matters a lot. Totally. Oftentimes that's been the deciding factor on what hired somebody versus someone else. Really important advice. Another piece of advice is own your mistakes. Goes with low ego, but nobody gets it right 100% of the time. I lose respect for somebody so fast if I can tell that they made the mistake, but they're trying to put it off on somebody else. And we can all sniff it out. Yeah. It is so much better for you to own up to the team and just say, I just didn't quite get this right, guys, but I'm going to work on it. I'll fix it. And you gain respect from people if you do that. Yep. Highly, highly incredible, important advice, especially early on in your career. Nobody expects you to get it right all the time. And everyone will be able to tell whenever you're punting the fault off on somebody else when really it's your own. So, man, own your mistakes. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that likely also attaches to ego. So it's just
big time. Yeah. Big time. And then the last thing kind of coinciding with that is there's this Bible verse that says, do nothing out of selfish ambition, but in humility, consider other people more significant than yourself. it's probably come across as like a major theme throughout this entire discussion, because it's helped me succeed in life in every facet. When I get into a new environment, I did this in the Marines, I did this at Beck, I did this at Brookfield, I continue to try to do it at Clarion. Like, I try to look around me and I try to think, what can I do to make all these people around me successful, to go out of my way to give them credit, make them feel good about what they're doing, help them in ways that they'll get credit for that I may not get credit for. Like, what can I do to help them be successful, to treat them with neighborly love in a way that I'm really putting their interests first as a human being. The Bible says, love God and love your neighbor, like really love your neighbor. If you just go out and love people, put them before yourself, I just think you'll be shocked how far you make it in life, how fast. It really matters. It's really honorable. And there's another Bible verse that says, whatever you do, work at as if you're working for the Lord, not for man. I think that God sees it and he honors it. So, last piece of advice.
Well said. Very well said. So I'm going to take that and roll into one of the last questions, which is any book or books you'd like to recommend. If it's the one that you just mentioned, by all means. Otherwise, go ahead.
Yeah, I could rattle off a few. U.S. Marines at the Battle for Sangen, great book. Owning Your Own Mistakes, Extreme Ownership is a great book.
Yep.
From Jocko Willink. He gives an example right out at the onset of a friendly fire incident and the approach that he took to own the issue. Great example. That's a really good book. Start with Why by Simon Sinek was a book that I read in college. Very powerful message on starting with why, on having having the why behind what you're doing is a massive motivator to, getting things done. I think that's an important detail. I've got a few others, but we'll keep the list short.
Yeah, no, some of those are my favorite, Extreme Ownership being one of them. So absolutely agree. Last but not least, what's your wellness practice look like?
I think I would think mind, body, and soul. I try to I try to prioritize health with a great amount of scrutiny today, especially because of the experiences and exposures that I had overseas, stuff we talked about with Hunter 7 Foundation and some of the guys that I've lost already. I try to get in the gym several times a week, eat very, very healthy, get great sleep. Honestly, it's like brilliance in the basics. Just do the basics really, really well. I have quality family time every week. That matters a tremendous amount to me. I try to turn off on the weekends. I think that I've learned in these last few years that rest is so much more important than we sometimes gather. For a few years, I was like on all the time, never stopped. And I started seeing that in my health. And so I turn off on the weekends as much as I can, take breaks to recharge so that I can hit it hard again. And then, I spend time in the Bible and prayer from a spiritual standpoint. Keeps my heart healthy so that I'm my spiritual heart, so that I'm looking at the world through a godly lens and being grateful and not greedy and, being content and, trying to have a positive outlook on things, instead of being pessimistic. And, it's easy to get very pessimistic today. There's a lot of things that are really not going right, or that are communicated as not going right. And it's so easy to get into a negative loop. But, staying positive is really critically important. So, and then the work that I do from my mind standpoint is very intriguing. So if you just do the basics, keep your body active, work out, get really good rest, do things that are life-giving to you, I think you'll go really far.
Yeah. Awesome answer, man. Landon, really appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, taking the time to do so. Again, congratulations on the book release. Excited to share that, help spread the word. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you. Yeah, honored to be here. Really appreciate it, Adam.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Landon, you hang on. Everyone else, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build.